Early traction in AI companies is often interpreted as validation. However, in reality, it's just the first visible sign of a market that isn't fully understood. I'm Mike Peroni. I've worked with startups, growth stage, and global enterprise technology companies for 20 years, designing, building, and scaling go-to-market systems to ensure product market fit is real and scaling it once it is. Most recently, I've architected ETQ's international expansion and developed the strategic positioning leading up to a $1.2 billion acquisition. And I've consistently seen early traction signals be misread as ready to scale. I've been consulting with a handful of AI native software companies in new AI categories, and it still holds true. Here are 3 principles to help close that gap. First, market fit scales, market signals do not. Early traction can feel convincing. You've got a handful of customers, they're leaning in, deals are moving quickly, urgency's high, it looks repeatable, but often it's not. Traction can be too narrow, or it could be the opposite, where signal is diluted across multiple market segments. Or further, it could be dependent on a non-repeatable condition. The transition from signal to fit is not binary. It's a continual learning process, best driven intentionally. For example, I work with the content tracking and monetization platform, and they had early strong traction. Customers were engaged. The team started to build features in response to that. On the surface, it looked like product market fit, but they hadn't tested whether those features reflected broader market needs or just individual company preferences. So we began testing positioning and messaging with new prospects and tracked that pattern across all deals rather than within one deal. We learned the signal was real, but it was very fragmented. That led the company to identify the market segments where the problem, the value delivered, and the product were all very well aligned. Understanding this signal is what leads to fit. Testing frequently in the beginning and more deliberately over time is critical, especially in new categories. The second way to close this gap is to solve the most pressing problems for the stage your company is at. A revenue system needs to meet the demands of the growth stage you're at. Early stage companies don't need a mature sales process. They need the latitude to discover new value on one call, immediately turn around and be able to test that messaging on the next call. Later stage, internationally distributed teams need consistent communication and rigor within a deal. For example, at ETQ, we built a unified commercial framework globally based on the MEDPIC framework. And regionally, we had standardized on definitions so the teams could test assumptions of where the deal stood with the customers. The system was about value selling, deal prioritization, and predictability, all at scale. So the principle is simple. Your system should solve the most pressing problems for the stage you're at. Early stage systems prioritize learning and discovering fit. Later stage systems prioritize discipline, alignment, and predictable execution. Getting this right is operational, not theoretical. The third point to close this gap is to build feedback loops that evolve as your company matures. No revenue system is static. Early stage feedback loops are about learning fast. Every conversion, every pilot, or early deal tests assumptions and refines message. Without wrapping that in structure, you risk scaling a motion that isn't repeatable, or you could miss patterns that reveal true market fit. So as companies grow, loops become more sophisticated. You aggregate knowledge across teams and segments. You align the entire revenue organization, and you validate assumptions continuously. At ETQ, this meant standardizing definitions, tracking key deal behaviors, and building tests into all of your MEDPIC assumptions. Feedback loops were the mechanism that allowed the organization to scale reliably without losing clarity. Whether your system creates an early stage rapid exploratory loop or a later stage deliberate rigorous loop, the goal is always the same: turn insight into predictable, scalable revenue.